Drew Thomas Hendricks here. I'm the host of the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. On this show, I talk with leaders in the wine and craft beverage industry. Today's episode is sponsored by Barrels Ahead. At Barrels Ahead, we help the wine and craft industry build stronger bonds between their customers and brands through authentic content. Go to barrelsahead.com today to learn more. Today, I've got a really special guest on the show. I'm talking with Philip James. Philip is the founder and CEO of Firstleaf, which is a personalized wine subscription service. Welcome to the show, Philip.
Drew, thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much for being on. We had a little technical difficulties, but we're ready to go now. So talk to me. Tell me about Firstleaf.
Sure. So Firstleaf is a direct-to-consumer wine company. We're an importer and a winery. So some of the wines we sell are ours and some of them are imported from other wineries. Mm-hmm. But I think what we do very well is we use personalization to figure out what each user will like. And essentially every box we send out is a unique combination of wines based on that user's individual tastes.
Yeah, I'm super excited to learn more about that. What, stepping back, because we're really, stay tuned, guys. I want to talk about wine and how it intersects with technology. But first, let's talk a little bit about yourself and how you kind of evolved into Firstleaf, because I know you've been through a few different ventures in the wine industry.
I have. I've worked in the wine industry and the e-commerce wine industry now since 2005, which is a while. And originally was working for someone else, a company that was an importer and a retailer, primarily a catalog company at first, and they were moving online. I mean, 2005, such a long time ago now. And fundamentally, I found the category just really complicated. I didn't have a wine background before I worked there. And I sort of think it's unfairly difficult, and wanted to make it easier for people to find wines they'll love. I don't have a memory for, a good memory for facts and figures. And so learning the vintages, learning the regions, the right bank, the left bank, and, the kinds of soil, my brain doesn't work that way. And so I left that company to create a business called Snooth. And the idea was to help people find the wines they're going to like. And over the years, I've learned that to do that well, you can't just give the information. You ultimately have to get the wine to them as well. And so ordering wine online is still a bit tricky, depending on the state you live in. Yeah. The shipping fees can be very high. Making sure it's in stock, and so on and so on. And so we try to solve it originally through data, sort of like a IMDb. Who makes this? Who's it connected to? What's the rating? But over time, I stepped further and further up into, well, we have to sell it, right? And we have to provide the customer service, and we should probably ship it. And here I am, third time round, saying, we should oversee all of it. We should import it. We should make it. We should control that experience end to end. And here at Firstleaf, I think, we sort of kind of have that in its ultimate expression. But it's hugely, that relationship direct to the consumer is hugely important to us, not just for the obvious of, well, we know who they are and we can provide good personalization. But it's hugely important all the way back up to the sourcing and the winemaking, because it really helps the winemakers understand, when they're making a wine for a kind of a cluster of our members, it really helps them understand to know exactly what those members are looking for.
That's really interesting, because you think a lot about wine and technology and servicing the consumer, but that backfeeding, that kind of data that you have to the winemakers to help them help them craft the wines to your consumers' preferences?
And we use it across the whole business. And I describe it internally as like a closed loop ecosystem. So yes, the front end is you would sign up and you would take the quiz and we'll tell you what goes in the box. you tell us what you like and don't like, we'll figure out what goes in your second box, right?
Well,
And
let's talk about this quizzes, because we've always seen, for the last 20 years, we've seen wine quizzes. Back in another venture, I had developed one where how is your wine personalization quiz building upon those in the past, and how's it different?
I think the quiz is good. The quiz works, but the quiz is not supposed to be all of it, right?
Mm,
The quiz is just the way to get you to the first box.
sure.
And look, if you knew you wanted higher acidity, leaner reds from Northern Europe, you could probably find that,
Hmm.
right? And like if you have your W set or your
Hmm.
CSW exam, you can probably describe what you want,
Hmm.
and maybe you join or don't join a wine club. But we
Hmm.
really cater to the people who they know what they like when they taste it, but they can't describe it.
Sure.
And I think it's unfair to expect people to know how to describe their preference for acidity and tannin. Can you imagine if I asked you to describe the music you liked in terms of beats per minute and which key it's written in, right? Which is just such a crazy way of having to describe something. You might say it's uplifting, right? Or you might say the wine
Hmm.
is delicious. Or anyway, and so people aren't. I don't think they should be expected to learn the same, technical language that we do in the trade. And so the quiz is designed as a way around that.
Hmm.
We use it for only the first box, and then we begin to use the ratings and your actual preferences,
Hmm.
which I think are more accurate, right? Much better to read or see someone's reaction to the wine than it is to infer it from, how you take your coffee or what kind of dessert you like. But in the absence of sitting down with the consumer and watching them drink six wines, we needed a faster way to get to that first box. And people can go as deep or as shallow as they wish, right? So the quiz is the front door. Um, if you want, you can talk to a WSET trained member
Oh.
of our MX, our customer service team, and you can dial it in. You can ask only for high sugar, low sugar,
Mhm.
low alcohol, regions you'd like, grapes you don't like. Get rid of the wines with high tannins. Whatever level of customization
Mhm.
you want, we can support. It's quite difficult to expose all of that to someone in the first 5 minutes,
Sure.
and we try and do it over time. Anyway, and so you're right. The concept of a quiz leading into a wine club is has been done a lot. But for us, it's everything that happens thereafter. And on the
Sure.
consumer side, it drives the personalization. But that information, of course, is just as useful for both winemaking. So you're going to make a rosé. Well, there's a cluster over here that wants it crisp and dry and
Hmm.
pale salmon, and there's a different cluster that want that rosé, richer and sweeter and more full bodied and a lot more skin contact, a lot darker pink. And you can make both, right? But we also have a good sense of how much of each to make,
That's key.
and which warehouse to go put it in so it's closer to the correct consumer. Um, and there really aren't many examples of ultimately a CPG company, that's able to harness that consumer feedback. Like it's built into our product cycle,
Hmm.
right? It's not a focus group, right? Everything we do, is under that glare of their consumer feedback
Hmm.
all the time. We know very quickly if the wine is great or if it's
Hmm.
missed the mark. And for us, that just, I think that helps us get better at every stage in the supply chain.
Oh, absolutely. Now that brings up an interesting question. You talk about the clusters, and you're talking about what to go back. The quiz is the perfect on ramp, and it's really what you do after that quiz that helps cultivate your user base. And the more happy they are with their subscription boxes, the more profitable and happier they're going to be. How do
Mm-hmm.
you go about without sharing the secret sauce? Talk to me about the clusters and how you're able to categorize these people based on their feedback.
So we don't put a consumer into a bucket, right?
Uh,
We don't say that. Sorry. So the output of the quiz for us on the back end is not a simple categorization, right? The output the quiz has some, I don't know, some huge number of theoretical possible permutations, right?
mm-hmm.
Possible answers. And we leave that unique for you, right? So you like these grapes, these regions, you dialed in your sweetness to this percentile, and we leave that unique. Um, uh, but when winemakers are making a wine, they do think of a sort of target persona, right? Like this is a Napa cab, and we want it to be, big and bold and fruity, and the tannins a bit riper and softer versus a Bordeaux or a Northern Italian red. And so they will make it with a persona in mind, but we don't put you in a category. We don't say that you want big reds and you want crisp whites or something. We don't have that concept of categorization. And what you like in red and white may not be the same, and so on. So we do look at it individually. I think the comment in passing earlier in this interview, I said nearly every box is unique, right? And so we send out something like 50,000 boxes of wine a month. And when I last looked, 98% of those boxes was a unique combination of wines that month.
How do you orchestrate that? That's got to be a nightmare in fulfillment.
So what it is, and we have very good fulfillment partners who accept that. So we have no economy of scale in the warehouse, right? We're not designed that way. And so 50,000 boxes, 98% unique. That means what? 49,000 are unique. 1,000 would duplicate with someone else. So there's a couple of 2s and 3s and whatever. But it's not like we put you in 8 categories and send out 10,000 boxes of each of the 8.
Yeah.
And the reality is people move around, people migrate in preferences and level of sophistication and the flavors that you look for. Maybe at first it's sweeter wines are more obvious, and maybe over time you develop a taste for the tannins and the subtle flavors, but maybe you don't. Maybe you just want bold, fruity wines, and that's how you stay. Anyway, and so we have no economy of scale, no efficiency in the warehouse. That's not what we're optimized around. For us, it's always been important to be focused on the consumer and ultimately the lifetime value. You talked about that. We have something like 2/3 of our members have placed more than 5 orders with us. And 1/3 of our members are now at 15 orders or above. And so we have,
incredible retention.
If you get through the first look, and some people take the quiz and don't go on, right? And so that's fine. I always signed up for HBO every time Game of Thrones had a new season, right? So we accept that there's people who come in and take a look and it doesn't work for them, right? Maybe at home delivery of wine doesn't work. Maybe the hands-off subscription where we pick the actual wines doesn't work, whatever, right? Maybe you're looking for something specific. Anyway, and so, but for people that stick around and kind of get it dialed in for their own preferences, the retention is very, very high.
I can imagine that. How do you manage a fulfillment like this where everything's unique? Is it just a pick and? Is it an automated pick and pack system, or?
So we use a 3PL called Wine Shipping. That's I think the biggest in the wine direct to consumer space, and hopefully we pay them well enough that they're okay with that. I mean, it's picked to order. We know a couple of days out. We have a good sense of what the orders are, because it's very flexible, but it is ultimately a subscription. So let's say you want 4 reds and 2 whites at a frequency of every 10 weeks, right? We know 2 days out, as your order is coming together, we know probably what you're going to get. Now you can cancel, you can make a substitution, but the majority don't, right? So we have good visibility a few days out, and we show that order volume to the shipping partner so they can staff correctly for the day. But until that morning, as a consumer, you can change your mind. So there's a 5% delta between the forecast and reality. But they don't get to pack it like a batch. They are packed individually.
Well, that's amazing. So you've got that whole individual hands-on, but then there's that technology. There's an algorithm that's predicting what you might or might not like. And there's so much talk today about AI. Is this an AI driven company, or is this an algorithmic driven company?
So the algorithm uses AI and machine learning,
Mm-hmm.
but when people talk about AI, I mean, right now, today,
Right
they're
now, it's
talking
super hot. You could just throw it at anything. I think I have an AI
I mean,
coffee.
it is, but when people talk about AI specifically today, I think they're talking about like generative AI,
Uh-huh.
and you can ask a question, and it will sort of summarize
Mm-hmm.
information on the internet back to you. I mean, it's fantastic, right? It's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of fun. Um, but AI was not invented by ChatGPT, right?
No.
AI has been around for a while, and AI and machine learning, the idea of so you can teach a human being to be a sommelier. You can
Mm-hmm.
send, in our case, we send our customer service team on the WSET, the Wine and Spirits Education Trust classes,
Mm-hmm.
usually to level 2, which is I don't know, 20, 30 hour classes, right? Plus some
Mm-hmm.
study. You can teach a human to do that. So you can teach a computer to do
Mm-hmm.
that. I never understood why people draw a distinction between the two around that. Computers can't innovate, right? And they can't speculate in the same way that humans are very good at. But to ask a consumer what they like, what they know about wine, and be able to use that to be able to make a recommendation. I mean, if you're comfortable talking about wine, you can walk into a wine store and do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I don't love it, but I'm capable of describing my wine preferences
Mm-hmm.
to any sommelier in a restaurant across the whole of the country, right? And
Mm-hmm.
because I've had enough training in it, they understand what I'm saying. I use the words they use, and they were able to give me a recommendation off the menu because I don't recognize, the tens of thousands of different winery names, and I don't know how this guy in Italy farmed his
Mm-hmm.
grapes, or how sunny his vineyard may be, but
Mm-hmm.
the sommelier probably does, and I can describe my tastes well enough, right? And so we believe that, at least for our consumers, we don't expect them to know that language and to describe their tastes. Um, Yet we can infer it for them. And just like maybe you or I could talk to a sommelier,
Mm-hmm.
we do that work for them, and we make the recommendation. Anyway, but the algorithm uses AI and machine learning, and I get that it's hot now, but we don't do that generative AI.
More of a
Um,
predictive modeling.
yeah, I mean, so it does learn from when, because we get the feedback all the time, right? So if
Mm-hmm.
you sign up and you take the quiz and we put 6 wines in a box and you tell us these 2 or 1 or 4 of them are not a good match, or these
Mm-hmm.
4 are a good match, of course that feedback automatically goes back into the database and is used
Sure.
the next time.
Mm-hmm.
It's used for you next time you order, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also used for everybody else who takes the quiz after you.
Mm-hmm.
And so it gets more accurate over time. So at the moment, if you take the quiz and you rate 3 wines, we're 97%
That's fast
accurate
enough.
in being able to predict a wine that you would like. But when we launched, that was like 70 or 75, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's got better over time.
Oh,
I don't
wow.
know if we I don't know if we need to get to 99.999.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even if you're an active consumer, and you buy from us every month or two, 30, 50 wines a year, bottle a
Mm-hmm.
week maybe, um, 97%, maybe we're only missing once or twice a year.
Mm-hmm.
We back it up with the money back guarantee. Phone us up, we'll give you the money back on that wine. And it's such a better experience for these kinds of consumers than it is in a store. When, look, a lot of people don't buy wine in a boutique specialty store; they buy it in a grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
And in most of those stores, there's nobody in that aisle to help you. And even if there is, if you can't articulate what you want because you don't have the technical words, and in a store, you're not sure why they might make that recommendation. I don't know if is the incentive different? Do they get a commission on certain wines? I don't know. But In the same way that Netflix and YouTube are pretty good at recommending me what to watch, and Spotify is very good at recommending what I listen to now. These models are very they refine and correct over time. Obviously, the challenge is you need enough breadth of wines to offer, and you need enough data. And we have several million ratings now from the consumers. You need a corpus of information to make it accurate.
How much of that was kind of what you learned at Snooth through that venture? Because wasn't that a lot of a community thought sink?
Yeah. So, I mean, the general the general kind of North Star for me has always been the same, which is frankly, I've resented how complicated wine is, right? And I always felt belittled, right? In my 20s in a restaurant, ordering off the wine list was intimidating. I took wine classes, like not as part of my course, but on the side.
Did you grow up in a wine drinking family, or did wine appreciation come later?
My parents drank wine. It was on the dinner table most evenings, but they didn't have a lot of knowledge about it, right? And so my mother, who passed away, she was a big fan of Chateauneuf-du-Pape.
Oh, nice.
Which even back then I knew was in southern France, but not down to the producer level. I don't think she knew what grapes were in Chateauneuf. Even I would struggle today. I think it's a lot of different grapes.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah. And so I'd probably struggle today to name them all correctly. So wine was on the table. It was not with any formality, right? It's like grabbing a beer, right? So a casual appreciation for wine in the house. And certainly the real appreciation came much later. But I always found it so intimidating, and realizing that this word, that's a place, or this other word, that's a grape, right? And it's not obvious at first, right? I mean, Bordeaux, fine, that's a place, but maybe you don't know at first that Nebbiolo is a grape, right? And not actually the name of a place in Italy. And so, I think it's unnecessarily complex. And I don't think we should have to memorize all that stuff. And the idea that you memorize which vintage is good, right, for each region is yet another level of, I don't know, memorization is not fun.
I used to geek out on that when I started. I was a philosophy and Greek major and just came right from the academic standpoint. And back in '93, the internet wasn't strong, and you could see just a bookshelf. Here's this row of books. If you learn this row of books, you're going to be pretty wine knowledgeable. And then you just keep up to date with vintages. But nowadays, and that was intimidating for a lot of people, which I could see. And nowadays, it's the amount of knowledge, the amount of wineries. It's hard to have a bookcase full of that knowledge. You need services like yourself.
I have never found memorization thrilling. I mean, that's what I did the night before the exam just to pass, right? So I studied chemistry at undergraduate, and I have a master's in chemistry from the UK, and I had to memorize the periodic table, right? I mean, I have a master's degree in chemistry from Oxford University. Of course, I had to memorize the periodic table, but I found it really, really difficult. And I had to use these like mnemonics to remember it, right? Because I don't know, what is it, 110 or whatever? There's a lot, right? There's a lot of them, and a lot of them have weird words, and they're not chemicals that we know, lanthanum and whatever. We don't bump into that in a normal day. And my professor said, "You will not pass if you don't memorize this." They were like, "I don't care if you want to, you will not pass your exams if you don't memorize it." And so I had to develop these mnemonics to remember all the chemical elements and where they fit. And then when I started to learn about wine, I was like, I can't believe it's the same. I mean, I'll do it for school because I need the degree, but I'm paying for this wine. I can't believe you make me memorize it too. And I don't know, I find that offensive. I don't need to memorize. I'm capable of buying a pair of shoes. I'm capable of choosing a book or a movie or ordering my entree. And yet when it comes to wine, why have we been conditioned to second guess our own preferences? I watch trashy movies and I listen to eclectic music, and I'm just as confident in both, right? In my in my naivety around TV and my knowledge of the weird music that I enjoy, and yet you turn to wine and we're all, intimidated and second guessing. And I don't know. I feel like that's wrong. We're paying for it. Why
It,
why are we belittling ourselves and
that's a
judging
great point.
ourselves?
You watch
And
you watch a
can't think
movie. You can enjoy a movie without knowing who any of the actors are in it, or you can do a song without knowing who any of the musicians are, or even the instruments they're playing, and you're still enjoying the song. But for some reason, with a bottle of wine, what are the varietals? Who made it? Where's it from? And you need to know that whole backstory.
I think it's so anti-consumer. I don't know. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
so basically I kind of have this chip on my shoulder. I think wine should be simpler. I think people
Mm-hmm.
should be allowed to enjoy it without memorizing it. I don't think there should be a gate of academia in front of this category. And so, and I think the internet fundamentally can change that, or has changed it forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you can look up the region, the grape, the producer, the score, whatever it is
Mm-hmm.
you might be interested in. And again, and wine is super complicated. If only it was 110 things to remember, right? But I mean,
Yeah.
there's 1,000+ different grapes just grown in Italy, and who knows, maybe another 1,000 around the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And if you get down to the AOC or DOC level, I don't even know. It must be thousands of individual regions, and then you layer on the complexity
Oh,
of
sure.
memorizing vintages and styles, and
Mm-hmm.
and it's incredibly complicated. I don't think everybody should have to learn what malolactic fermentation is, or whole cluster press, or aged on the lees, batonnage. It's in a foreign language, just to add to the complexity. Anyway, and so we cater to people who want it, who like it, who are willing to spend on it, and they're somewhere in that rank between obscure collectors and casual drinkers, somewhere in the
Mm-hmm.
middle there. But that's a lot of people. That's tens of millions of people in the US who like it, but they're not self-professed connoisseurs, right? There's room in the world for people who collect stamps, but there's also room in the world for people who use stamps as a
Oh,
method of postage.
for sure. For sure. You mentioned so earlier in the conversation, you talked about CPG, consumer packaged goods. Would you put Firstleaf in the CPG category or the technology category?
Oh, yeah, it's a good question. We've had that debate, over the years. I don't know. We're both. I don't like that categorization. I mean,
Yeah.
I think when my team forced me to answer it, I said we're a wine company that uses technology, right? When they
Hmm.
forced me to do it, but I don't know if it's 60/40 or 49/51. I sort of don't like that. Because you say it that way and you imply that it's 100 slash
Hmm.
zero essentially. And I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, look, we will we only sell wine. We've never sold anything else. We've never sold
Hmm.
a corkscrew, let
Hmm.
alone a beer or a spirit. And I don't even foresee when we would sell anything else.
Sure.
We have no intention of taking our algorithm and applying it to different categories, or to licensing the personalization on its own,
Okay.
right? And so, and I talked about that closed loop ecosystem. For us, we're all in on that. We
That's
will.
important today with consumer privacy, making sure that you're not selling their data, keeping that
Mhm.
closed loop just to help benefit the consumer.
Sure. I mean, for us, it's sure. I mean, you're right. There's a benefit there. We never. That's not the driving reason for
Hmm.
us. For us, it's from the ground up. Our data and our algorithm
Hmm.
is designed around the wines that either we have made, or the wines that we've worked with other wineries to make, right? And
Hmm.
that's it, right? And it's like it only functions. It's like a searching your own hard drive.
Hmm.
It's only indexed the information on your computer, right? Versus searching inside Facebook or whatever,
Sure.
right? Like our data set is designed for us and our business.
Hmm.
And everything in and around the algorithm is designed for the
Hmm.
way that we work. And I don't know, it just doesn't seem worth it to try
Hmm.
to retool it to do anything else. And so you're right, there happens to be the consumer privacy benefit, but we are a CPG. It's not really my categorization, but wine is an FMCG, right? A fast moving consumer good.
Yeah.
Um, But we are all in on US DTC wine, and I don't think, I mean, never say never, but certainly have no plans to ever do anything else. We don't sell into trade. We did try briefly some years ago, but it wasn't. I didn't like it as a business model. We immediately lose the personalization. We immediately lose the feedback of the consumer. The closed loop system breaks the moment that we sell into trade. I don't think we'll sell outside of the US. I mean, for me, this is a very focused play, but it happens to be in the largest wine market in the world that is deregulating, that is allowing direct to consumer. And of course, leveraging, all of the data, the internet, everything you and I talked about on this, during this conversation, but also all of the data that we can get actually out of our labs and on the wines themselves.
Yeah, the U.S., I mean, I can see why it's concentrated on the U.S. And you may not know, internationally, how are subscription services like in other countries such as Britain or France and Italy? Are there competing models going on over there?
You mean for wine or
for wine? For wine subscription services. I know it's sold very differently in every country.
I mean, so there are some large subscription services for wine in the UK, for example. There's there's Laithwaite's, right? They run the Wall Street Journal Wine Club in the US, right? But in the UK, they run the Times newspaper. Or there's a much older company in the UK, I think it's older, called the Wine Society, which is a kind of wine of the month subscription service. Neither of those, to my knowledge, focus on personalization. But
and you've got like hyper personalization with every box being different. That's amazing.
I mean, okay, when we say personalization, we assume it is. I mean, I think it would be weird if you logged into Netflix and they're like, hey, we're just going to show you other shows that people who like, international travel. No, they like, it's for you, right? But I get it. I guess personalization might mean many.
It's been watered down by people.
Can mean many things, right? Maybe controlling how many bottles are in the box or the frequency. Maybe that's personalization. No, to us, personalization is down to the person.
To the true meaning of the word, because you could call it an email template where you put the first name in there, personalization, but you wouldn't really call it that personalized.
Yeah, fair enough.
So no, you've got some hyper personalization. That's
not what we mean, but yeah, fair enough.
Definitely technology driven. Stepping out to more of a broader picture here is on your website, you talk about being a serial entrepreneur. You've gone through a few different companies, many different companies. What advice would you have for like a young and up and coming entrepreneur in the wine industry as far as leveraging technology?
I'm trying to give an answer that isn't superficial. Because, I mean, I feel like some of it's obvious, right? That like technology, of course, is reshaping everything we all do, right? But technology doesn't necessarily develop in the way we all think, right? And I remember reading a quote, like a VC quote a long time ago. And, they said, we asked for flying cars and all we got was 140 characters. But, the reality is we all now have a perpetually connected supercomputer in our pockets, which is unbelievable, right? You talked about having, I see behind you a bookshelf, right? And, I used to have to, not that long ago, to find something, I used to have to go to the library and not just check the book out. Many of those books don't leave the library, right? So they give you the book and you have to stay on the premise to go read the book.
Yeah.
But when you're finished, you drop it back off, right? Which is so alien now, right? If I can't pinch and zoom and, and whatever, the world is obviously very different. I'm not to generalize, but I know some people are like, oh, I'll just run a company for 2 or 3 years and flip it. And to those who did, I guess, but that was not me. I've been doing this for a long time, 15 plus years in a relatively focused market, e-commerce of wine in the US only, for, 17 years now. Some of the wine industry is resistant to that technology. Even going back only 5 years ago, just before the pandemic, people would make comments about, they're not sure if they want to go all in on the internet, right? Not that it's going to disappear, but unsure about its impact on the wine category.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't long ago that the whole wine industry was very, very anti automation.
Mm-hmm.
Automated harvesting or an optical sorter in the winery, and kind of computer control of understanding the fermentation and the vineyard itself. I think labor costs and hiring challenges kind of moved people over. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I think there's an arc that technology is inevitably
Mm-hmm.
following. And there are pockets of rapid adoption and maybe pockets of resistance. And,
Mm-hmm.
it feels like the wave is sort of surging back and forwards. And so I think I'd just encourage people to zoom out and really look at the macro trends, because
Mm-hmm.
they're true over the time cycle of your career, right? They're true over 20 years and 30, 40 years, even if you zoom right in, the thing that was true 2 years ago is not true today. But I mean, if you look over 20 years, e-commerce adoption of wine is a real trend.
That's one of the, I think you hit the nail on the head there with zooming out sometimes. Because the way I see a lot, and I've made this mistake multiple times where I've just been so focused on one feature or one little technological loop, or that it becomes this vicious circle where we never get the product launched. And by the time we get that thing figured out, we've lost scope of this whole macro market that we should have just been in the market.
So we launched Firstleaf in early 2016, right? So we're sort of 7 years in now.
Mm-hmm.
And we were a solid business before the pandemic. At the start of the pandemic, we grew very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And at the tail end of the pandemic, we gave up some of that growth, right? And so, there was an era in there where my investors thought I was a hero because we were growing so quickly. And there was an era in there when they thought I was an idiot because we were losing some of the scale.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to keep reminding them that no, let's back out, right? Let's look where we were in 2019, or don't forget that we only launched in 2016,
Mm-hmm.
and we're a much bigger business today than we were at the end of 2019. And the someone gave me a quote. So people talk about a career ladder, right? And it was described to me as like a climbing wall, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you go up, you go across, maybe you go down a bit. I mean, you're
Mm-hmm.
still climbing up, but it's no longer a direct, because I think my dad had 2 jobs. He worked for the military for 20 years, and then he worked for the local government for the next, whatever, 25 years or however long. That's it, 2 jobs. And probably for him, that's a career ladder, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have this title, maybe you get promoted to the next title eventually, right? And people take much more indirect routes to success. The world that we have built today is much more complicated, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that generative AI will play a role in many businesses,
Mm-hmm.
but computers and technology have been playing a role in our business and many others, and increasingly, for decades. And it's not just we can email and whatever, send a file faster. It's the we can look up and register a trademark more easily, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we would have had to have used a lawyer before. Or we can generate analysis around a blend we're considering,
Mm-hmm.
and run it up against the algorithm and do that in 10 minutes. And it used to take us, even at the start of the company, it used to take us 2 weeks to do that because we
Mm-hmm.
had to send it out to get analyzed, right? And so technology is just allowing us, and people talk about like technology will like lead to the end of our jobs. I think no, I think technology will just allow us to do new jobs,
Mm-hmm.
and technology will speed up a lot of the routine stuff. And so, I want to go all the way back to when I said, if you can teach a human how to be a sommelier, you can teach a robot how to be a sommelier.
Mm-hmm.
But But that doesn't mean we don't have sommeliers in the future. It means sommeliers will do more advanced stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's a way that as a diner, I don't know, do you pre-fill some questionnaire on open table,
Uh-huh.
right? And now every restaurant you walk in has some sense of what you like.
Mm-hmm.
And the sommelier now can like tease out maybe the entree you're ordering or the occasion or
Oh,
the group or something else. Like how much better would a sommelier be if they already knew what your preferences were before you walked in, right? I mean, just for example, and I
yeah.
feel like technology will just create new and better jobs on top of the sort of routinization of the work that we used to have to do that computers can do for us reliably and faster, but the creative work that humans are good at can always sit on top of that.
That's very good. I like that idea. It painted a good future of how you can kind of level up the whole sommelier process in a restaurant for sure. For them to just be able to stand on the shoulders, because a lot of times, like in a wine store when I used to work there, I'd get to know the customers, so I kind of know what they like when they come in. Most of the time, the sommeliers just see that diner.
And how boring is that? I mean, to me, it's unfairly boring, unfair and boring to the consumer. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I don't know how many times you eat out, a human eats out per year, but let's pretend it's once a week.
Mm-hmm.
50 times a year, you have to explain to a brand new person that you like Pinot Noir, but not, if it's sort of too much barnyard.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I don't know. Couldn't they have saved that? Couldn't they have
Yeah.
shared that? I mean,
Like
like,
here's my preference. My
yeah,
skin
and
back to
and
something.
and there's a real art to, well, there are four people at the table and you guys don't obviously overlap, but
Mm-hmm.
these are your entrees. Do you want to be bold or do you want to be safe? Like, let's make the choice for you. Um, in almost everything we do online, those preferences get saved, and the search results or the recommendations or the whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. My airline knows I like a window seat. I don't have to keep telling them, right?
Yeah.
It's my settings now. And yeah, I mean, the things where it bumps back into the real world, they don't have an easy way to save that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there are ways, we just have to build them, right? Again,
There
it
was a
exists open table, or it can exist on your, I don't know, your contact information on your phone. Maybe you have to bump your phone with the sommelier when you walk in, and then they'll figure out the wine for you.
there was a company I interviewed about a year ago, and I know I'm gonna get the one wrong because I believe it's Sipped, where it's a social wine rating and sharing thing, and the people can integrate it. Their goal is to integrate it with menus, so that anybody at the table, it could compare all their different ratings, and then it would
Hmm.
recommend a wine based on the collective people at the table.
I mean, I see this just the fundamentally the concept of aggregating that information,
Mm-hmm.
categorizing it, tying it back to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
It just unlocks the next layer of stuff beyond that. I can't
Absolutely.
remember. It's been a long time since I wrote my resume or applied for a job, but back in the day, I wish I had LinkedIn, right? I wish I
Mm-hmm.
had one click application for jobs. I wish, there was a matching tool that found the
Yeah.
right job for me. It was very crude and inefficient. I don't know. Remember what dating was like when you had to stumble over to someone in the real world and introduce
Mm-hmm.
yourself? And anyway, so I think the human appetite for new things will just get bigger and bigger. And I have nephews, and the jobs they want to do, I mean, they're like 10 and 7. The jobs they want to do didn't exist when I was younger, right? They want to be content creators or Twitch gamers,
Oh,
right? These are not jobs that existed, when I was growing up.
yeah, esports. That's a whole nother conversation. Oh. Philip, as we're kind of wrapping down here, where can people learn more about you and Firstleaf and take the quiz and subscribe?
Well, simple. You could just come to firstleaf.com. You can obviously take a look at the quiz, sign up and try those wines that the quiz recommends. We did recently launch something that we've called Wine Print, because I've talked a lot today about, one of the most important things to me in wine is understanding your own preferences. And it's
Mm-hmm.
one thing for us to understand them and give you the wine, but we wanted to help our members out in the real world. And so wine print is what I've been talking about. It's this like distillation of your preferences. And, turns out that I do like big, robust, fruity reds. And wine print is how you or whoever's listening can discover the same thing about their own preferences.
Very interesting. You just hand the wine print to the sommelier. Say, here, this is...
Save it, take a photo, print it out. Yeah, exactly. Memorize the sentence. Exactly.
Sure. Oh yeah, it is this. I love that. I've got to go do that one. So Philip, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation.
Yeah, Drew, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Legends Behind the Craft podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.